And then there are two items that we'll be requesting an increase in appropriations, and we can talk about those after we kind of do the review. So I'll make sure we don't forget about these before we leave, and then I can present them to General Counsel after. Hopefully we okay it. So kind of turn over the floor. I know you already got the computer up going, so if you can kind of just run through the draft FRP.
So the printed fiscal recovery plan that's in front of you is in four major sections. The first being the assumptions, the second being the totals or the cash amounts, the third being the capital improvement plan, and the fourth section being the staffing plan for the city. This is a draft plan. It has not been approved by the state. We have made some adjustments requested by the state, and after this meeting there will still be several adjustments being made, however, none of which will be significantly material, mostly to do with some of the payroll sheets that I'll show you, and making sure clothing allowance and some of the other benefits such as dental optical for the AFSCME people are all correct per individual. So some small changes will happen from the layout. When you get into the area that is actually the math of the plan, you'll see your forecasted years. So you have 3 actual years, 17, 18, 19, these are the cash amounts, and then 20 through 24 are our forecasted years. These are currently taken down to the dollar amount. So, when you look at numbers like, $2,854,990, the plan itself will, because of the format that's required, round all of these numbers up to the nearest 100. So you won't see $99 at the end, it'll be 100. If it's $703, it still becomes $800. So it's always going to be rounded up to 100. So you'll see a difference between what you're looking at here and what the actual plan will look like when you get it. The reason that it looks like this now is this is still in spreadsheet form, that we are making changes on the payroll level, changes on the capital improvement level, and a lot of those things have some specific dollar amounts attached to them. And when we do our payroll projections, they're actually calculated down below the 100 mark. So we're going to need to make those adjustments. That'll be the biggest thing that you'll see between this and what is actually brought forward. And we're still waiting for, once all of that's done, sending it back to the state and getting their approval on the rest of the numbers. So going through from the beginning, the first section, which was prepared by the mayor, is the financial recovery plan assumptions. And you're going to get down to page 4. This is similar to what the previous FRPs looked like in its format, and you'll see a lot of things when we're talking about the revenues for the city, action plans, when they began, are they ongoing? We'll put that up on the screen here as we get down to it. And you'll see there's basically boxes that say, here's something we're investigating, this is when we're beginning it, and is it completed, or what is the projected completion date? So each one of these that's highlighted is an assumption that's been added by the current mayor and are things new to this plan, so you can review all of these. These are then the assumptions that are held within the that's shown within the math of the plan. Some things above, most things above the line, a few below the line, which we can look at the end. So as you see, page 4 through 8 are those assumptions. And again, the highlighted are the new ones since the old plan. So you can look through that as you will. As we move into the plan itself, we get into the spreadsheet, and you've all been emailed copies of this draft spreadsheet. When you're looking at it, you'll see there's 2 yellow tabs on the bottom One says GF printable, the other says other funds printable, and that is what the document that's printed out that you're looking at. Now, this is only the general fund, the street and state highway fund are not printed and put in this document because we're focusing on the general fund, but those funds are able to be seen by hitting this other funds printable tab, and you'll see the other funds which we will report within fiscal emergency, but each one of those is basically a one-page document. They're pretty straightforward. You know, the crux of this is going to be the general fund printable tab, and then the capital improvements tab is the next one over, which is blue. All of these other tabs carry through into what creates this printable document. So starting on essentially what is page 9, the first one that says draft only, you'll see at the bottom it says final copy will be rounded to the nearest $100. You'll see that top section is our revenues. In 17, 18, and 19, these are actual revenue amounts. And then our forecasted revenues each year through 2024. When we show the amount of revenues, for example, for 2019 is $25,644,476. That includes money that went to Fund 89, which is the Property Reinvestment Fund. So money from those 4 companies that we have that is segregated, where half of their corporate earnings tax is placed into a fund that they can get refunded if they meet certain benchmarks. That is mixed into this number. So these are not the numbers that are in our financial reports, because we show those 2 funds as separate, general fund and Fund 89, where in the plan they have to be mixed together. But when you look at it and you see the increase under municipal earnings tax, there is an equal increase under the earnings tax office contractual services. Then you'll see on the second page at the bottom, earnings tax office contractual. In 2017, there was only $68,000 spent in it. In 2018, there was $35,000. And in 2019, $1.8 million. And that's because we moved the amounts for earnings tax refunds into the earnings tax office key from miscellaneous, and we mixed in that money that's segregated to Fund 89. So since we're showing it on the revenue side, we also have to show it on the expense side, as it is segregated and goes into a separate fund. So this year it'll be 1.8 million. Last year it was about 1.7. That you'll see it both increase by that amount in revenue and in expense using that tax department key. Everybody understand that? From a revenue standpoint. Then we see each department as it flows down, broken into the major categories: personnel, contractual, materials and supplies, fixed expenses, debt principal and interest, and capital improvements. A few departments also have refunds, but they're relatively small. Moving through each one of these, you'll see the largest is payroll in each department. You will see an increase in the payroll numbers between 2020 and 2021 as we are calculating in increases for health insurance. Health insurance was one of the things that really drove the plan down to close to negative numbers last year, because the state was their desire was to have us show a 15% increase in the healthcare cost each year for 4 years out, where we've talked to our healthcare providers, the insurance providers, and come up with what the mayor and I have worked with them is probably more realistic, which is in 2021, a 15% increase in healthcare costs. In 2022, flat, so we'll get a 2-year plan, just like we did this past year. We had a plan that covered both 19 and 20, so there was no increase in 20 because it was the same rate. We're going to get the same deal again, 15% increase in 21, flat in 22, 10% increase From that in 23, flat in 24, each time getting a 2-year plan. We do have flexibility now in working with the employees in choosing different plans and finding something that's comparable to what we currently have, but being able to go to other companies and kind of shop the market to try to get the best deal that we can. Some of the things that have happened is within the new union contracts, employees are going to begin paying for part of their health insurance, and since they are paying a portion of it, I think having more options of plans for the employees to choose is a good thing, because now there's some ownership of how much this costs. So we may even see, whereas right now we have 85% of our employees all choosing the more expensive plan, that'll probably shift since people are now paying part of it. So that's not calculated in the plan. The plan only shows the 15% increase and then the cycles of the 2-year plans. But that is something that we can think about that may drive that cost down even a little bit lower. We have calculated in also the portion that is paid by the employees, and that shows in the within the payroll figures total. Within payroll, we have also included any of the new employees to be hired. We have to hire police, we have to hire fire, we have to hire public works. There's several people. We've also included all the numbers in the plan that was presented by the mayor for the salary ranges for the appointed officials. That is something that has come back to Finance Committee and should come out and be considered by council at the same time that you are considering this plan, because the two are tied together. The salary ranges for all of those departments that were suggested on that previous ordinance that was sent back to committee, those are all built in the plan. There is a lot in this plan on the capital improvements. There's a lot of things built in here that need to be done for the city, but we need the people to do them. You can put as many projects as you want, which you learned last year on that capital projects list. You don't have people here to do the job and run these projects and get the bids and work with the contractors and work with our public works guys. It's not going to happen. So I would strongly consider you guys at your next meeting looking at that ordinance and getting that back out so that we can hire people and we can adjust the salary ranges of the existing ones. Do you have a question?
About the ordinance that we brung out, I thought the commission has advised us not to move forward with that.
Until after it's baked in, though. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's built in
the FRP.
It's built in the plan, so they can be passed together.
So then we're going to send this to them, and they're going to look at it again.
Yes.
And give us another opinion on.
So on the 24th, you'll get. So right now on the 10th, when you meet Tuesday, you'll have this plan.
Okay.
Or maybe an adjusted version of this, probably this plan, which shows it's not changed to the $100 mark. So, but that'll be the major difference you see.
Okay.
You'll have this to review, and then prior to the 24th meeting, you'll have the original one, the final one, once the state approves that. And what I'm saying is on the 24th, you should consider not only passing the plan, but also passing the ordinance that establishes the positions that are built in the plan so we can hire and pay the people to do the jobs. Before
the commission gets a chance to take a look at this?
Yes.
Okay.
And that I find if the financial supervisors allow that to happen, I find that somewhat hypocritical, because they've always said that, oh, you can't do anything until the commission approves a new plan. So council approves it, then the commission. But we're potentially passing an ordinance that's changing salaries before we know if the commission's even going to approve.
Well, I mean, you can wait another 2 weeks, and projects wait another 2 weeks to get started. I mean, it takes a while to hire people.
Oh, I don't disagree. Maybe there's a special meeting the day after the commission approves the financial recovery plan that we do the appropriations, then we do the ordinance. I don't know, but it's just interesting to me that the financial supervisors are going to allow that, but there's been so many other much smaller things that they're like, no, you can't do, and that's the part that I just.
Well, it's all rolling at once. When I started putting this plan together, and they had said you couldn't pass the salary changes, they told me to build in the plan the salary changes, or they said it was okay
Right.
to build in those new salary ranges in the plan as though those people were being hired. Now, we're building them in as only partial year employees because we can't hire them now. We have to wait until,
There's also the chance that they will get back to us before the 24th. If we'll know what the state comes back to us before the 24th, potentially, and says, I'm okay with it, then in my head, do I have to wait until the commission approves it? Because we already know a big holdup here has already said yes.
Well, I mean, with regards to when you say the 24th.
well, we can
24th.
talk to the state about the timing.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
you
mean,
said you're
It's
gonna
see their
do.
desire, and if they're like, you have to wait till the 30th until the commission approves it, then I say on the 1st, you should have a special council meeting and pass that.
Yeah,
Which is your
So
point,
that you
yeah.
can start advertising for these jobs and collecting resumes. Because right now, without knowing even a salary, we've got some departments being run by part-time people. We've got other departments that, people are coming in on a temporary measure just because we can't, as favors, because we can't hire someone because we can't tell them how much they're going to be paid. Or the position doesn't yet exist.
I just want to make sure that we're consistent in like how we've treated this, because like I said in the past, it has to be in the plan. It has to be in the
Well,
plan. And
In the past, it's been consistently inconsistent.
yes, we can agree on that.
So-
So that's all I have. It's fine. Either way, however we do it, I'm actually not too worried. It's just wanted to note that discrepancy. And
I've already kind of proven that I'll vote outside of, I was ready to vote for the prior. So
Yeah.
I've already proven that. So
You've proven
but
it.
now that it's came back, I mean, I'm just being honest that now that it's came back and they've basically given us our recommendations, I may be a little hesitant to do that again. So
Sound fun?
I think the difference between when you're, I don't want to get off point, it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, as we
Okay.
said, yeah.
We're talking a week. I think that it's okay to do on the 24th for a couple reasons. But whether we do that or
I
we
trust-
do have
I
another
trust
one on
these
the
guys.
30th,
Yeah.
I'm indifferent.
I
But
do.
I think it should be the 24th, but I'll talk after
And we
offline.
will directly ask them if that's okay.
and I trust that. I trust that you'll do that, Jim.
So as we get into the plan and you look at departmental budgets, every department that has submitted a budget, their requests are built in here. We did not short them. So fire chief, police chief, both gave us budgets. What they asked for is in there. Under capital improvements, we'll get into that also. We did get budgets from most departments. Those departments that don't have regular heads now, we did not, which is kind of another issue. So we are trying to extrapolate previous year's expenditures to determine what their budgets were. And I did, for the police chief, I did find and add in the budget request for dispatch, because I didn't find it because it was on the back of yours. But it's in there, and I talked to, T.A. Brown talked to Officer Rankin, and we're good. So got all that in there. So all departments that did submit budgets, their requests have been met. Within that, we also have a pretty vigorous capital improvements plan. Now, within the spreadsheet, as you move down, there are some areas that are marked in yellow. Here, you'll see. And what these are is I still need to go in and split out principal and interest payments. So on a budgetary standpoint, when we budget for a debt payment, like a lease on a vehicle or a lease on an ambulance, we budget at the payment level. Whereas within our audit, when we report at the end of the year, we separate principal and interest. But you don't budget principal and interest separately, you budget them together. Well, within the plan, they want it done where the principal and interest are shown separately. So here I just need to split out the interest payments from the principal, and those two areas are marked in yellow. As we get down towards the bottom of the plan on the spreadsheet, there's another area in yellow, and these are numbers that should we increase the percentage paid by employees of health insurance, this is what, and this is below the line, it's not built in the plan, it's after. These are the dollar amounts that'll change, and these are not accurate. I have to calculate those yet. But they are below the line, so they're kind of at the end of my list of things to do for this. within the plan, as we work down through it, and you get to almost the last page, there's this area of miscellaneous expenses. Make this a little bigger. The area of miscellaneous expenses, you'll see, has a lot of zeros as we move over to the right. Well, we used to track like state examiner fees, county auditor treasurer fees, election expenses, advertising delinquent taxes, things like that. We paid out of a miscellaneous key. Well, in 2019, we took all of those and moved those to my office contractually, which is why you see the auditor's contractual budget jump up. We took things like the settlement of claims and the outside legal fees and moved those to the law director's office, so you see a little bump there. And as I explained before, we took the earnings tax refund line and moved it to the earnings tax office. So a lot of these other ones like real estate taxes, technology upgrades, these all move to public lands and buildings. So what we end up with is not this kind of hodgepodge of miscellaneous expenses at the end. We actually built those into departmental budgets, so they moved to other areas. If you look at the copy of the old FRP on that page, there's actually an indication there that says where each one of them moved to. We took that out this time because it was more important in 2019 to see the change of where each one was moved, where now they're just built into department budgets. So you'll see a lot of zeros over here. The only ones that are remaining, we're paying off the end of the retirees' healthcare and the C9 trust outstanding expenses. These are POs that were still open at the end of the year. We see a few trickle-in bills, but most of that's done. The other part of it is the retiree benefit program, where those certain class of approved retirees get a $3,500 check every year. And this is the total amount actually paid this year, $479,500. And that should be pretty stagnant or taper down over the years, just slightly. But we know how much it is this year. The time for filing has passed, and we've already sent the checks out a month ago. So that's a fixed amount at this point. The most important thing on the page, as you get through all the numbers of all the departments and what their projections are going to be, is as we get down to the bottom, you get the total expense for the year, $26,353,022. Again, that'll be rounded to 100. And then we've got our debt service. This is our bond payment, is this next section here. And if you notice, the bond payment goes away in 2022. We have 2 payments left on that bond. This is money that really, when you look back, this goes back to the 90s. Refinanced in 2003, refinanced in 2006, refinanced in 2012, I think, 2011, 12. And we'll be done with it. And that'll make me feel good. So this year, we're paying $311,000 in principal and interest. Next year, we're going to pay $348,000 in principal and interest, and then we're done. There is no, within these bonds, there's no benefit to paying them early. In other words, there's a prepayment clause that says you pay all the interest. It doesn't matter if you pay it today.
Where's the bonds at? I can't find them.
That's on, sorry, the document is not totally numbered correctly, but it's the third page back.
He's got it.
Yep.
I got it, thank you.
Yes. So you'll see that go away, which is good.
Oh, I see now, okay, all right.
On that same page, when we look at it, where it says debt service on the top, as we move down, you'll start to see some of the important numbers, where just underneath that you see excess of revenues over or under expenditures. So in 2020, we're going to spend $1.7 million more than we're bringing in because we have a cash balance. And there were projects that were slated that haven't been done, so we're doing them all this year. Next year, $920,000 over our revenue, but again, we've got that amount that we're carrying forward. Then $24,000 over, and then you'll see we start going positive after that. As we move down, you'll see changes in fund balance, and then you'll see Fund balance deficit at beginning of the year, $4.6 million. Now we still, if you move one down to the left, you can't really see it on this, sorry. As we move down here, we'll see we had $744,478 of open purchase orders at the end of the year. Usually that number is under $300,000. Our target's $250,000. These were a lot of large capital expenses that were not completed. So that number is actually added in on a departmental level on each of the major keys. So it's not just the things for this year, it's the leftover money from last year that wasn't spent that's then credited towards expenditures for this year, because this is for 2020. They try to show it as a cash expenditure for previous years, and then for forecasted years, it's done as budgetary for accrual method. So we're showing not just what we're spending out of this year's budget, we're showing what we're spending out of this year's budget plus all the open purchase orders from the end of last year. So when you get the first meeting of April, the change to appropriations that will make appropriations match the plan, what you'll see is that they don't match the plan. Because if you had open purchase orders, those are added to the plan. We take those off from a budgetary standpoint. So there will be some variance, but I'll show you where that is in the spreadsheet, and you guys can look at it because it's kind of fun to dig into those numbers.
So I had a question about that. So I thought doesn't the work have to have been done in 2019, but the purchase orders stay open to pay
That's correct.
invoices? So why is there a whole bunch of capital improvements that weren't done in 2019?
Because people didn't close out the POs when they left.
I guess so. Then why haven't we just closed them out in the last 2 months?
Because you can't close them out once you close the year.
So you're saying, so then what actually, what ends up happening to those open POs?
They're closed out now, but they're still on the books for 2019 when the year closed out. So the first week of January, when we work at closing out the year, it's closed out. And the chiefs here are really good about going through and saying, oh, get all of these off the books. Jane Grody from my office calls around and says, let's take all these things off. There are some things they can't take off, like the last pension payment for police and fire. You'll see those are in there. That's like $348,000. But that's money from December, and bills from December that didn't get paid till January because you don't get the bill till January. But you still have to book it as being $2019, but it was paid this year. So from our audit standpoint, on audit, it'll show those pension payments as being $2019. But this is cash, and in a cash reporting method, you're showing dollars spent during the calendar year, not dollars spent within your budgetary year.
Okay.
The other big important thing as we come down, third line from the bottom, fund balance or deficit at the end of the year. You can see in 2017 we actually had a negative number, $1.1 million. And then in 2018, $1.9 million. 2019, $4.6 million. 2020, it'll be $2.8 million. Then 21, $1.9 million. Then $1.9 million. Then $2 million. Then $2 million. Remember, the magic number for us is going to be about $1.5, $1.6 million, because the recommendation by the GFOA, the Government Financial Officers Association, of which I'm a member, is that you should always carry over enough money to meet your January expenses. So you carry money each month forward to pay the next month's expenses. You don't pay down to zero. For us, that means about 1.6 million should be our target carryover for each year. So these numbers where we're ending 1.9, 1.9, 2.0, 2.0, those are important numbers because we know we can pay our bills in January. The next line is open purchase orders. You can see we target about $250,000. That's pretty reasonable. If you look on the previous years, 17 we had 193,000, 18 we had 292,000, 19 was the big year where there were a lot of open purchase orders that didn't get closed out.
Damn.
2020. Yeah. So The last line is the unencumbered balance at year end. That means if you take your purchase orders off, how much is left? And you'll see all of those are above 1.6 million, which is our target. So we meet the financial requirements. We've got positive balances. We've got, towards the end there, the last 2 years, our expenditures are less than our revenues. We're using the money that we've carried over. But again, a lot of things that need to be done to the city haven't been getting done. Let's get them done. We're using those to improve the city, to buy new equipment, and do a lot of things that the city requires. So as we move to the next part of the plan, this is all the big stuff that we're going to be doing. This is the capital improvements planning worksheet. And it has, by department, each year, things that we need to do and need to buy. You'll see that 20 and 21 are very heavy in their purchases. Some things we know we're going to be purchasing every year, so we carry them all the way out through 2024, like new police cars every year, a new ambulance this year, and a new ambulance 4 years from now, because we should be buying a new one each. They should have about a 5-year life cycle. That's what we built it as. So every time an ambulance is turning 5, we got to be thinking about buying a next one that's 6th year. As we move down, you'll see at the top here, the fire or the police department section. I did add in. I didn't talk to the police chief about this, but in 2021, building upgrades. That's for like the academy and for the shooting range and everything. I think that we have some buildings over there that probably could use some upgrades and some work done to them. So we did build that in, as well as the lead remediation. Within the fire department, there's working there to replace the roof, repaint the exterior, do the drainage apron in front of the firehouse, which is broken concrete. You'll see a new fire engine with the first payment being paid in 2021, which means we'll probably get it this year, because usually the payment is due the January after you receive it, and a new ladder truck beginning financing in 2022. A new ambulance straight purchase at $230,000 in 2020 and another one in 2024. And then you'll see debt payments on the existing ambulance. You'll see that there's interest. I should click on the capital improvements tab here, sorry. You'll see that there's interest payments and get up to where we are. There's principal and interest payments on an ambulance, and then I'm showing us just buying one. Well, if you have the cash, you should just buy it. We've done some, you do financing on big projects. Usually we would do financing on an ambulance too, but we've got the cash right now. We should just purchase it and get a better deal by doing it that way and then not paying interest on it.
Yep.
That looks a little low. It's $230,000. Is that buy an ambulance?
We're ready to go.
Yep.
Standard of care, we'll be ready to go with the purchase as soon as appropriations are done.
Yeah, like we should get it this summer, right? Yeah.
Nice.
So that's fire department. We saw police department above that, fire department, and then we're moving down to parks and playgrounds is the next section. There's a lot of detail here, and the detail was presented by the mayor as a breakdown of what he foresaw as the improvement to that park. Strategy. It doesn't mean that these are line items that you're locked into. The total amount is budgeted for all of these projects at the bottom. Mm-hmm. It is not a line item budget that says you must do these things, but we're trying to come up with what's a reasonable amount of money and what's the initial plan. That's what this is. It doesn't mean all these things happen, but it does show that we're thinking about it and we put a timeline together, and these are kind of our goals. Things may change as we're working on the projects though. So we've got improvements to waterworks, we've got improvements to Burwood, we've got new bleachers at waterworks, we've got Victory Park improvement, Burwood Park improvement, Northwoods Park improvement, Millcrest Area 3, Lower Millcrest, Shelter House, and Upper Millcrest Bathhouse, all planned out over the next 4 years. Most of the work being done or being started at least this year.
Yes.
We move into the street department. This is not the street fund, but it's purchasing some vehicles. And there's some things that we could really use here, like a blacktop roller. You know, actually a little thing they drive that, what do you call this? They used to call them steam rollers, but they're not steam anymore. That when we patch things, we can like roll over it and like flatten them out and really work it in there instead of just throwing potholes and stamping down with your hand. We also have a vibrating asphalt plate in here, which is the smaller version of that you hold, and it vibrates up and down and pats the smaller areas of asphalt for street repair down. So the smaller potholes, you can just pull that out and really push it down in there. I'm not a civil engineer, so I don't know all these terms. Push it down in there sounds good. So, but we've got equipment for them to start fixing it. You know, we've got directional signage on illuminated trailer. You know, we
Pickup
look.
trucks too.
Huh?
You forgot the pickup trucks too.
Pickup trucks, yeah. Walk behind paint sprayer. Actually, we didn't put in the dollar amount for that, so we will have to add that. We were talking to the head of the superintendent of public works last night and getting numbers for that. So that does still need to be added here. That'll be one of the things we'll have to do.
Was there any discussion, Jim, about instead of getting a paint sprayer, getting like some kind of a thermoplastic applicator or something where instead of having to repaint it every year, it would last 10 or 15 years, you know, with some of the technology that's out there?
Yeah, that's beyond me.
Okay.
You can talk to the mayor and talk to the superintendent about, because again, you know, you're not locking into buying that. You're just saying how much money you think it's going to be for that year.
I think a really nice thing, in addition to strategy, it's when all of us have questions of this versus that, by putting something in here, that becomes your baseline. So if it was $10,000, can you find a strategy that uses that as your baseline? Is it just a little bit more for something that has a lot more value or a little bit less?
Yeah.
That's just a nice thing that we get to actually have numbers that we can rely on.
Yes.
I think a little bit more than just saying loose strategy, goal is the better word. I think it's a little heavier than just kind of a guideline. At least that's the view that I'm taking through the next year.
We did put in the street sweeper for this year. We had it, I believe, in 2022 originally, but my understanding is it broke. So
Yesterday.
yeah, yesterday. So we did move that in. And we have parking meter upgrades here, also built into that for streets. This is all general fund money. Community center further out, like 2024, ideally, we're going to be upgrading that building. One of the things that I think we do need is an elevator. If we're going to continue to use that building, we need access for people to be able to move through it. So that is one of the things we thought about. It is pushed back. It is 2024, but it's part of our kind of longer term planning, and maybe we'll move that forward once we make further determinations as to the usage of that building. We've got public lands and buildings. This is another big area, just as big as parks, as far as where a lot of things are going to get paid out of. We have a lot of problems with the things that the city owns being very degraded. That includes the property, the buildings, the lands, and this is a plan of how to improve it. And you'll see we need a new roof on City Hall. We need to replace the windows at City Hall. There's damage, water damage, that was already done. The brickwork outside needs to be repaired. If you walk in the front doors, those, you know, the bricks that run down the side that have the lights on them, those are falling apart. That stuff needs to be repaired. AC, new front doors for City Hall, replace some of the windows at Community Center, upgrading this room. Now we have it here more in the future, but we also added some planning for that for this year, which we'll get back to as we move down. We need to upgrade the lots for City Hall and the surrounding public parking lots that we have for our citizens and for our employees and everything. They are very deteriorated, so we are going to change the structure and modernize them. Some places have gates. There's other city property. The flooring in the media control center needs to be replaced. Signage needs to be updated. We need to work on our HVAC system. If you notice, there's a lot of window units in this building. And the long-term plan is to move to ductless heating and air conditioning systems for each one of the offices in City Hall, and then removing them from the boiler system and getting into a more modern and energy efficient system that will work with the windows that we're going to be putting in for this historic building. So I don't know if you've been in this building in the winter, but it's, when I'm sitting in my office in January and I have to run the fan on the air conditioner, blow cool air in because it's roasting in the afternoon. You've got that side of the building that's too hot in the morning and freezes in the afternoon, and it's just a very old system. So that's one of the things that we've got in there to look at. Doors, upgrading, you'll have to look through this. We need upgrades to our fuel delivery system. We need to work over in Public Works. A lot of this is the Public Works grounds to be upgraded, getting LED lighting in there, better lighting, remote access controls to the buildings, upgrading their parking lot, upgrading the fuel delivery. We have a fuel tank over there that our vehicles use. 2 other parking lots, Sherman and Station and Elman Station, upgrading them over the next 2 years. Moving, and this is kind of a vision as we move forward into other years, getting the city, as we buy new cars, to buy electric vehicles and have charging stations. So that we've got the building department, when we buy them a new car, when we buy the new pool cars for the city, having charging stations in our parking lots and using electric vehicles for the city. Financial software updates. As it stands right now, the software that we have, we're upgrading the new system. They should start installing this in May. You have to pay for each year of the old system that you want to access on the new one. Currently, we're only going back 9 years, so we go back to 2010, because this year is the new year. But the historic years, you'll only be able to go back to 2010. Now, we still have the old system running in parallel, and we can go back to 95 on the old system, but how many years do we want to bring into the new one? So we put money in there for upgrading software, and that's a discussion to have. And also, when we're discussing it, when we have to do this. Do we have to do it when they do the initial install, or can we buy years to be added later? Hopefully we can buy them to be added later, use what we have and go, wow, we really wish we had 2008 in here, and add those. We have emergency storm sewer repair. We had to add that in. There is a drainage that's over by Norwood Avenue that goes down to the lateral and needs major overhaul. The bids we've got now are between 130 and 140,000.
Pet spot, right there,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Yep. Keep people from caving in and sliding down on the lateral would be a good thing. And then we built in this public building repair and upgrades to be named. We put $100,000 in this year so that if things come up that we haven't foreseen, because once we lock this plan in, we're locked into it until next March. So what could happen? Could the doors on the firehouse break? Could the roof cave in on the police department, or more likely cave in here? What is our contingency for emergencies like that? Well, we built that in. So, and that's just based on our aging infrastructure. And in future plans, we may not have to have such a large number carried out to the future, but we need to think. And a lot of this is too looking, well, what are we doing in 2024 for buildings? We haven't planned that far ahead, so we just put a lump sum in there from a budgetary standpoint because we don't have exact projects that are going to happen 4 years from now. Improvements to the health department building. That's an old building. It needs work like many of the old buildings in the city. Recreation, there's some purchasing of things that goes on there. Working on the basketball and hoop system within the gym. It's really interesting that gym has a nice stage on it, but there's a giant backboard that just sits right in front of it. And it would be nice if the community,
It comes up, out of
well,
the way.
we're going to put a new one in that electronically comes up out of the way.
Okay. Nice.
So, but that's the idea, is upgrading those backboards and making them on, like a pneumatic device that'll
I
lift
can
it
remember
up.
watching plays on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we'd like to maybe, be able to open up to the community again, so. And have it like push a button and make it go up, so.
Very nice.
Well, they need to be replaced anyway.
There's some things here for the water and the street fund, but really we didn't dig into these because some of these things this is still left from the old plan because we didn't address what the new street plan is within this because we don't have to. We're just budgeting the full amount of that fund to be used mostly for matching funds. There is some material and supplies that come out of it to buy asphalt, etc. But that's not built in long-term for it. And that even questions as to, what else that money could be used for. The plan for the money for the street fund is to do major street projects. Some pothole money comes out, but we just got, and we'll talk about it later, a grant to redo one of the streets in Norwood that's part of that appropriations ordinance.
Jim,
So, yes.
why is this our street fund and state highway fund are two of our financial emergency funds, fiscal emergency funds, but they're not?
They're not on there because I explained earlier that I didn't print them. They're on this tab that was emailed to you.
Okay.
See this other yellow tab that says other funds printable? That is them. So the next section of the plan as we move through this whole big mess is the staffing plan, which we went through with the mayor. This is the staffing plan based upon the ordinance for appointed officials that needs to be passed. So it's all built in the plan, both dollar-wise and from the staffing plan. I have a few pages of things that I still need to update, and mostly it does with Safety Service Director's Office, Public Works, Parks, and Public Lands and Buildings. There's just some small changes that'll happen within those. And they have to, mostly it's going through and making sure who's available for the flexible spending account, who gets the dental optical insurance that pays through Asks Me, double checking the health insurance on people, and making sure that the longevity payments follow. Because, for example, we have an acting superintendent of public works who's not been fully appointed to the position yet because we're waiting for the ordinance. But he's acting, but once he moves, he's got his longevity because he was a public works employee will move to the new key. So we have to make sure all of that balances out because he's moving from one to the other. It's a wash across the board, but it's still. So this file that I sent you guys, some of the important things to look at. I wouldn't really worry about the payroll 2019. Because that is what we used budgetary last year. It does not reflect the actual expenditures, but we do use it as a reference for creating the files for the following years. There's a workers' comp breakdown here that shows our actual payments that we are scheduled to make and actual payments we did make this year. We do have a true up, which is a discount that's being reflected. We did not budget for that for future years. We only put in the actual amounts because we don't know how much we're going to be getting discounted. And then a breakdown of how much goes to each department. This is based upon the staffing of last year. So even as we hire new people, this won't change. It'll change next year. The payroll sheets, if you look, everybody's on here. There are these three gray columns. First of all, the far left column carries in the amounts of pay from previous years if it's the same people or same position. Then the gray columns show the new salary ranges based on the ordinance that you'll be considering. And then the greater of the two is carried over. We budgeted the low end of the new range plus 5% for those people. Now, that doesn't mean they all start at that, but that is the option of the individual hiring them. Each position is, it tells you the name, how much they make, and then we've got estimates on overtime, shift differential, longevity, everything. And as we move over, you'll get their total salary, then pension calculations, then their Medicare calculations, their workers' comp, which is imported from the tab that I just showed you, any separation pay or clothing allowance. Separation pay is just totaled on the bottom of the department. We're really just budgeting it for the two big departments based on averages from previous years. And then clothing allowance, life insurance, flexible spending account, which is also the dental optical, which are these orange ones. The people that are in Ask Me, we actually pay an insurance for dental optical for them, where the other employees will be getting a flex spending account contribution of $500 from the city. And then healthcare costs. And we actually went through and found over here to the right each individual which plan they have and what is their monthly payment. And then what the annual payment is carried over next to their name. And then calculating how much of each one of their insurance the employee will be paying. That number is then carried forward to following years. At the end, we've got this orange column that says partial year corrections, and what this is, if you hover over it, it'll pop up, it'll say the projected start date for this individual is June 1st. So therefore, we take his total amount of costs and we take 5 months off of it. So that he's only paid 7 months out of the year. So, but if you hover, there's little notes on each one of these, and these are all the employees of the city. Where we are going to be hiring people, we put new hires A through I. Since I started creating this, there are some new people, and we'll be adding their names here over this week, and then making the adjustments accordingly. But you'll see we're moving some people around. There are some people that are split between multiple funds. So as you move, then there's a payroll sheet for 2021. Same thing, imports the data, carries over, has the raises built in that have been negotiated into the union contracts. And then everybody on this one is full-time for the full year, full complement for all departments based on the staffing plan. And then we've got the same thing for 22, 23, and 24. This number far to the right where it says total, that's the number that's imported into the master sheet under payroll. So that number then comes over to this sheet that's called master, which is this thing. And you'll see each one of these blocks here, these large sections, is a year. So this is 2020. This column shows what the current plan is for 2020. These are our the old plan. This one shows these are the 2019 encumbrances. When you ask, well, you know, what are those POs that are open? It's in this column. So when we get the final plan, what we'll be doing is taking the numbers of the total that are in the plan, rounded to the 100, and subtracting these numbers from the plan, and then that'll give us what our appropriations are. A lot of these, the green lines, this is payroll, and it carries through. You can see it links to the page. This is 2020, this is 2021, and then it just goes across 22, 23, 24. And as we added things, for example, you'll see these blue boxes, they all connect to the blue tab, which is capital improvements. There are boxes that just have little notes, and they're like, oh wait, here, we're getting, we want $4,000 for training, and we've got to buy some equipment, you know, or this is for computer purchase. This is for lead remediation. So sometimes you'll have to look back on the capital improvement sheet, but all of those link to these blue boxes on here. Other times, you'll see a tab that just basically says it's an adjustment for it's adjustment to match their budget. So let's say I had, you know, an estimated based on the old plan that a department was going to spend $20,000 in contractual, and they sent a proposed budget to my office, and they needed $24,000. Well, you'll see there's just a tab that says 4,000, and there's a little note pops up, and it says, you know, to meet budget. So it just goes across, and then this category here, or this column here, is what gets exported to the printable sheet. So because in future years, we actually look at things and say, 2021 through 24, we're looking at contractual and materials and supplies, and we budgeted in a 3% potential increase for inflationary reasons, meaning even if your department is flat, you know, if you're spending that 24,000 this year, you're spending 24,000 plus 3% next year, and plus 3% the next year, because we're trying to budget some inflationary costs into it. So because we do that, we don't have numbers that are round to 100 that carry through to the sheet, which is why we'll go through manually and round all of those off. So everything here is just calculated to the dollar. The sheet will be calculated to the $100. We do have a debt tab here that shows the major leases for the city. These are leases not like for example, we do have like printer leases, but these are lease payments that graduate themselves out. So if we're making principal and interest payments on a vehicle over 5 years, that's what's on this tab. And this shows the new fire trucks and the ladder truck here. And what our expectation of costs are, but those are estimates.
Yeah, and just so everybody at home's watching, I mean, the term lease, we have to lease these things, but at the end of the lease, we get to keep the equipment.
Correct.
For the at least
They're a lease purchase, yes.
Lease, yeah.
So that's the debt tab. We do have a revenue tab here, and these are just the revenue projections by key in the general fund. If you were interested, you could, scroll through this. It does split out as we're looking at this. This shows the actual revenue for earnings tax, and then we add to it down here the estimated amount for the Fund 89, and both of those numbers added together make the revenue for the plan. Because again, the plan shows revenue as general fund and Fund 89, and then expenses Fund 89 out under the earnings tax key. And that's pretty much the spreadsheet. You guys have copies. You can mess around with it. Understand it's all a draft. Everything we have here is draft. There will be some minor changes, and it will require the state's approval to get on your desk. But I think overall, this is what you're looking at. And the key points are positive cash carryover every year, departmental budgets and requests being met, all contracts being honored, and positive cash balance at the end, and huge amount of capital improvements to fix things around the city. I did just briefly talk, I talked about this room. One of the things I was talking to the mayor about, because there are so many problems with the HVAC and everything here, is bringing someone in to look at this year and maybe draw up some plans for a long-term idea of how to remodel this. So the planning amount is budgeted, but not like fixing it.
Yeah, I think it's a smart idea on that.
Because frankly, if you take these tiles down, it's amazing up there.
I've heard
Jim, you've did a good job here. You went over a whole lot here, so I want to commend you, because I've been talking to you here in the past few weeks, and it seems like every time I call you, you're working on this in some capacity or another. So I want to make a comment about how much work goes into this. So I appreciate that, and we're lucky that you're doing it. However, I want to be selfish. I don't see, and I know this is a plan and we can change, whatever, but there's a few things that I'd like to see in here that I don't see, as far as, I'd like to see some upgrades for Fenwick Park, or I'd like to see some upgrades to the ball fields at Fenwick Park, and I'd like to see that's just one of the things at Fenwick that may be others. And I also would like to see something done with the basketball courts at Hunter Park. I personally would like to see the courts come back. I know that there would be others that may have different opinions, but so I don't see that in here. I don't see those parks named. I realize that it's just it's a draft, and maybe they're in there and I just didn't see them.
If we look on the capital improvements plan on page 3 out of 8,
Yes, sir.
because we knew things would come up that people would say, what about this or what about that? The last line on capital expenses for parks and playgrounds, we made a line that says parks upgrades to be named.
I did see that.
And we put $30,000 in this year and $60,000 in for the next 4 years. because we don't know exactly which parks need attention, and to make the expectation that we're going to know everything, March 1st that needs to be done for this summer, we did budget for those types of things.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I just, that's great. If we can name Fenwick and the ball fields, or Hunter and the basketball courts, I would appreciate that. But
Definitely talk to the mayor about that.
Yeah.
Because that's his capital improvement plan.
Okay.
He may shift money from those keys and just say, okay, we're going to earmark it for this.
I really appreciate all the work you did. So I'm just being selfish.
But then again, when you realize, when we look at that total line there, even though it lists all these parks and all these things that we're going to do, it's only budgeted for the dollar amount at the end. So if something comes up and it's like, well, this, something bad happens in one of the parks and we're going to have to put money into it this year, you can take it from one and put it to the other.
Okay.
It allows that flexibility. The capital improvements plan is not a commitment to do these things. It is showing that you are planning what to do with your tax dollars to improve it over time. And so, just like last year, a lot of things didn't get done that we're going to put in this year. There might be things on here that, and honestly, when we look at the number of items that are on this capital improvements plan, and I know I've argued on the staffing thing for a while, but if you don't have people here to do it, these things aren't going to happen. And even when you hire those people, what is a reasonable amount of jobs to do and projects to start? This is a huge thing to tackle in really the next 20 months. And can it all be done? Hopefully.
And I think another response to be going specifically to parks is that happens in a few other areas. Having things like that Parks Advisory Board, giving insight into an audit, maybe the same thing when we come up with the streets plan, doing the streets audit. These sort of things allow us to better put strategy around the guidelines that are sitting here in the capital improvement plan. So the stuff that's earmarked for the parks that were listed, great, that's really good strategy, and there was a lot of thought, I know, between the administration, Public Works, to what they wanted to do for this summer, this fall. But not only was there a line item that's left open, there's also kind of like, I don't want it to be John or me or James or Chris saying they want this park. It's really trying to find out, or this street, it's trying to find a third party and like an objective guideline to why we're coming up with the strategy that we're coming up with. So I think it's like a really exciting thing to be able to say, there's money there, there's a strategy, there's a plan, but there's also the ability for us to take information from residents in a logical way, an objective way, and say, okay, we can modify it here. I think that's a cool way to operate in 2020 and 2021.
Well, the other thing to think about too is this has been done in a very condensed amount of time, because we had a new mayor, a new administration. They've only been in office 2 months, and working with them, we started working on this. Really, the initial was done towards the end of last year, but before we really knew what we had, and frankly, what direction the union negotiations are going, and all these other things that drive this has really been something that's been put together over about a month. We should, once we file the tax budget in June, come July, you should be looking at this for next year. And that's the time to look and go, well, we knew we had these things we wanted to do in 21, but let's look at 21 and 22. And so by the time we get to the end of the year this year, we should have most of this stuff planned out for next year. So that it is going to be more of that long-term planning. We need to be looking into the future and seeing, and as we, somebody who lives in a 120-year-old house, as you know, every time you tear something out to fix it, you see how, we just have to remove this part of the wall. And then you realize all the horror that's behind there because 5 other people have fixed it wrong before you. So is that what we're going to run into with some of these projects? As we go and say, well, here's a simple project. Well, wait, because the infrastructure is so old, this is going to take longer, or it's going to take more money.
Most definitely.
Yes.
Cool.
Gotcha. So some of my concerns of the plan, I think overall it's a really, really good plan. I mean, told you privately a few of these concerns, so they won't come as a surprise. But, the first one's a street fund. I don't think that we're taking into account the full increase in the gas tax from last year because the 2019 gas tax increase came in July. And so it looks like that we're only estimating like a little bit over 700,000 in the street fund for revenue, but I think we all know that the revenue is going to be higher in 2020.
The numbers that I put in were the ones that were provided by the state, and those were provided in the fall of last year, late fall, early winter. So, I could approach them and see.
It's probably not that big of a deal because there's probably not enough time to even utilize. It probably won't make that much of a difference.
Right.
But, I think we'll probably have to readjust that next year. Also, the capital improvements in the plan are all very much front-loaded, which makes sense because of the savings that we've had over the last couple of years and the general fund balance. The concern I have for 2024 is that the capital improvements are very minimal, and even with the minimal capital improvements, we still have, just barely, showing a positive when it comes to the expenses, or the revenue minus the expenses for the year. Now, it's 4 years out. I think it's fine. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's just something to watch as we look at future plans to kind of see, does revenue end up going up above plan, which has happened in the past, or do we look at expenses in the future?
Well, you've rightly pointed out in the past that there are certain expenses like the 15% in healthcare cost increase that, those are sort of things that we know today are highly unlikely to be holding us back and weighing us down. So I think the downside and the upside that we've baked in probably
I
go
think
like this when you outlook 4
that's
years.
true, but there is a change in this plan that there's a 15% increase next year, but there's no increase in 2021, and then there's a 10% increase in 2022. There's no increase in 2023. There's a 10% increase, and then no increase in 2024. So they did fix that specific one in here.
But the other part of that isn't reflected.
Is all the family and the
Right. We're paying $26,000 a year for a family plan to the majority of our employees. And now, if they have to pay 5.5% of that, that's a big hit. And I think a lot of people will come in, because up to this point, if it was totally up to you and you didn't have to pay anything, why wouldn't you come in and take the Cadillac plan? But if you're paying for part of it, the decision's going to be, well, do I really need that? And are we going to see this shift from about 85% of the people getting the most expensive plan to seeing that number drop? Some people will still keep it because it's of value to them to buy that. Yeah. But other people will look at it and go, I want to go cheaper. And there's other options that really weren't explored or given as options, I feel, in previous years, where you've got a healthcare savings account. There's opportunities for that are built in too, where you can have this long-term account, and if you take this higher deductible insurance and establish this account, the city will put money in for you to build that up over time. And I think as we give more options in our insurance opportunities, people will be choosing things that are not $26,000 a year.
Yeah.
And all of the new people that we're hiring, the state said put them all in at the top family plan amount. When realistically we know that's not going to happen. So I think, yes, we're seeing a low number as far as our earnings over our expenses for those last years. But I think as we adjust it, and especially once we come out with the new health insurance plans this year, and people make those decisions in November, as part of that, they have to find out about those things earlier, like in September, give them a couple of months to look and make those decisions. I think that you're going to see the healthcare costs not go up 15%. Even though the plan will go up 15%, our cost won't, because people will be making more educated, more intelligent decisions on the programs that they choose.
Okay, thank you.
I think a lot of us probably definitely had goals heading into the past 3 months. And I'm really glad that you made yourself available for me and a bunch of council members to do multiple dives with you over and over again. You went through all the detail that you needed to go through. To simplify this down, and I'm looking at the goals that I made a couple months ago, to what kind of at a high level this looks like. Your $1.5, $1.6 million balance is met. Check. the big three critical needs. They talked to me, they talked to other council members. They definitely were in yours and the administration's ear when making these assumptions. I think you can mostly put a check through a lot of the critical needs. I'm kind of looking at you two, and if Clint and John were here, I think they can say the same. I've talked to them both. The capital improvements plan, I think using the Bonsall format appropriately considers parks, infrastructure, and streets, at least in a way that majority hits a lot of like not only our critical needs, but gives us hope and excitement for what this place is going to look like in a little bit. Yeah. And so if I just look at those three as my original goals, I can put a check next to all of them. And then the personnel and org structures around police, urgently, the public works, the fire, the community development, health commissioner, all these sort of things put together the infrastructure to carry out a lot of those plans. And lastly, and this is the biggie, this is a really strong case to get out of fiscal emergency probably in a year or so. So I think for my perspective, for people on TV, you can walk away from this plan just at a very high level saying, yeah, I'm not only supportive, I'm pretty excited about what this shows for just those 30,000 foot view needs. So my 2 cents, and I'm thinking you guys echo that, but.
I agree, Mr. DiNardo. Well said. I'd like to hear from Mr. Miracle. You've been listening to this, and you've seen what's going on and observed the plan. Do you have anything to say at all? Do you have any?
Well, I think what Mr. DiNardo just said. I think we've hit all the key points. And our goal, obviously, to get out of the fiscal emergency plan. But we also have to look at the accounting methods, which we're going to talk about Monday night. Mm-hmm. So we have 33 of those to go over.
33.
It's gonna be a fun meeting.
He's just not eye candy over there.
So this is huge, I think, very important. And kudos to Mr. Sith. But got some more work to do.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say that this wasn't just, the mayor and I put a lot of time into this. But as you probably pointed out, this capital improvement plan worksheet, this was designed by Mr. Bonsall. And I just took what he had and built on it. And, it works. It's a format that I think clearly shows what the intent of the city is and, taking care of our people and our property. The other one is, I know that we have a lot of arguments with the state, but this information you're looking at has been gone through thoroughly by Anna Mary Thomas from the state auditor's office. And, with her help, it's going to be a really good, vibrant document when it's finished. And again, there's not much that has to happen, but just changing a little bit of the formatting on it. So it's not just been the mayor and I. There's been other people working on this too. So
I heard Mr. McCabe over there. He had his hand up. Can we address him? You got something to say, sir?
I was just going to comment on the insurance thing. I think one of the takeaways too is that this city has always been at the end of the term for health insurance and not really appropriately given time for those plans to be really vetted, investigated, looked at holistically. And I think this administration, speaking with the auditor, that process is going to start a lot earlier. And I think you'll be able to have some better decision-making opportunities. It's not forced at the end of the year at the 11th hour. So I think that's really important. That should be helpful in terms. The other thing I had to say too is that when in talking about formulating the FRP and beginning that process in July, I think that'd be really helpful citywide in terms of a budgetary process that begins not in September, realistically
I think a takeaway I wrote down, this wasn't on the original goal, but it came in talking with the two of you. I think first quarter is when we're going to more formally formulate this, especially if we're not out of fiscal emergency. But then third quarter is a really good time for us to invite, well, you three, or four for John and Clint, just a review, kind of like a financial state of the union I'm envisioning, and just to kind of just check, are we meeting some of our 2020 commitments that we set, or hitting up the strategic look that we're trying to do? And how are we looking for 2021? How are we looking how are we looking for 2022? So that's definitely an intent to try to do the four of you guys, twice a year, first and third quarter. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
So we could, the next agenda item.
is the appropriations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is on the agenda for Tuesday night, which unfortunately I will not be there for that meeting. I'll be working, but there is a request to change appropriations for this year. It's for two funds. One is Capital Improvements Funds 2. We have 3 capital improvement funds. We use those typically as pass-through accounts, that if the state comes in and does a project that they're contracting and managing, the way it works is they pay the developer, they pay the contractor, they report to us on a regular basis what's been paid, and then we have to show that as revenue and expense. Although no cash comes to us, we have to show that on our books because it does improve the infrastructure of the city, which is then reported in our audit. So we did get a letter that approved an Indian Mound project for $1.3 million, and we need to appropriate that money. So we're changing the certificate of estimated resources, which their budget meeting for the county meets Thursday. So we have to pass this ordinance Tuesday so that they can approve the new certificate that shows this money coming through on Thursday. The other thing that's on there is the Danamount School Fund. That is a TIF fund. When that money comes in, usually in April timeframe, there's two lump sums that come into the city for property tax. And we get a county settlement sheet with that shows how much goes into each one of these TIF funds. And that money is then segregated as property tax to pay the schools for their amount of that TIF. So we need to adjust the balance of that fund to represent the projected money that's going to come in so we can pay the schools when the money comes in. And that's the Danamount TIF fund, for school fund. So those two adjustments are reflected on the certificate of estimated resources that we are going to have updated on Thursday. But in order for them to consider it, we must change the appropriations to match the certificate, which has to happen Tuesday. So this is not actually any cash that the city touches other than the Danamount, which we just hold and then pay the school.
They've seen this the last time we changed the appropriations, like a month ago too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So the Danamount, that's the TIF, that's just a cross-through fund, that's just money coming in and money going out.
Right, so it's collected, it's property tax that's collected from this tax incremental financing district for Danamount. So much of it is based on that TIF agreement. The schools made an agreement with the developer that they get a portion of the tax money coming in, and so that portion is put into a fund that then we, once we and the schools agree on how much it is, then we send them the check.
And then the letter I got in my hand here says assistance has been approved. Is that a loan? Will you explain that for me?
That should be a grant.
$1,350,000.
Yeah.
That's for Indian Mound.
Correct.
And this is a loan to help with that, or is this
that's just money. That's a grant.
Money coming out of one of our.
No,
Yeah,
all that is
Revenue.
the state's going to do a project, like Ohio Public Works Commission will do a project, and they will pay the contractor, and they'll tell us how much they paid the contractor, and then we book that money as revenue and expense.
So this money's coming from the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, looks good.
Thank
I know he's got to run, so I want to
I
be
do.
conscious of his time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming,
pretty
because I
much
know
it.
you have a family obligation.
Yeah. I've got a few minutes, but yeah.
We're kind of good. I mean, we've already touched on, I just didn't want it to take from his time. We touched on kind of like the particulars around timing for things like the salary and position ordinances. I had kind of quickly stated my opinion, but it's okay. We can figure out.
You got a
Maybe
couple
on
Yeah,
next-
I was gonna say, yeah, we've got a few weeks figured out.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not massive. It's not hurt. Even if worst case scenario, it'd be like a week. But I'd prefer to do it on the 24th, and I'll explain why.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
And I mean, I think it should be on the agenda for the 24th, even if you decide, or if the state says, yeah, hold off, at least do the first reading.
That's a valid, very valid point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bless you.
Just,
Okay.
I got one last comment, and that's just because I'm, that's why I'm not sitting in your spot, Mr. DiNardo. So, this is money coming that the state is going to pay to help with the project on Indian Mound and others, or just Indian Mound? Somebody explain it to me exactly.
Indian Mound, Sheridan, Parmalee, and Wakefield Place.
And this is state money.
Yeah, so
Is it a grant, or
they
is
no,
this just
yeah, well, it is gonna. Sounds like it's going to be a grant because
Okay.
they have to book it in this capital fund because
Okay.
the city has to show when they make improvements to the infrastructure of the city. So this is how they do it.
So we are getting a grant essentially, and
Yeah.
we're applying this and changing our capital fund, and we're depositing that. That way we
Because
can
when you
spend
looked
that.
at there
Then
will
we're
be
going to immediately go.
because there will be no when you look at this there will be no cash deposited in that fund. Like literally it's just a pass through fund.
Okay,
essentially.
okay.
Yeah, but it won't affect anything.
But it's also gonna, this is not the total cost. We are also gonna be,
there will probably be some part of it in
all
our
right.
street fund.
Thank you. That's it for me.
No, it's a good question.
All right. I'm good. Is everyone fine?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks for talk.
Excellent meeting.